Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of House Joint Resolution 142, a resolution disapproving the action of the District of Columbia Council in approving the D.C. Income and Franchise Tax Conformity and Revision Temporary Amendment Act of 2025. Congress has the constitutional right to review legislation passed by the D.C. Council under the D.C. Home Rule Act. It also has the authority to block such legislation. In this case, it should do just that. In December of this past year, the D.C. Council enacted, without the mayor's support, legislation that denies tax relief from D.C. residents and businesses that was afforded to them by the Working Families Tax Cut. While D.C. taxpayers still enjoy the benefits of such tax relief with their federal tax filings, they're being stripped of corresponding relief that should also be afforded to them at the local level. In other words, the D.C. Council has rejected tax provisions that help relieve the burdens faced by D.C. residents and businesses. There are 9 tax provisions that the D.C. Council has completely opted out of in the D.C. Income and Franchise Tax Conformity and Revision Temporary Amendment Act of 2025. 7 of them are targeted at tax breaks for individuals. This includes service workers relying on tips as part of their wages, workers relying on overtime, senior citizens relying on Social Security, and even residents just trying to write off their charitable contributions. They're all being targeted by the D.C. Council. Specifically, the D.C. Council is opting out of the following tax provisions that House Republicans championed for all Americans. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security for senior citizens, no tax on auto loan interest for certain personal car loan deductions, and even the increased standard deduction, meaning that D.C. taxpayers who do not itemize their tax deductions will not be able to claim the full amount of the federally expanded standard deduction in their local tax returns. And individuals who take the standard deduction will not be afforded an additional charitable deduction like they will have in the federal tax code. Stripping away this tax relief from the residents of D.C. is egregious. But, Mr. Speaker, that's not all. The D.C. Council has not stopped there. They're working also to ignore the Working Families Tax Cut's pro-economic growth business deductions. That is, the radical D.C. Council also wants to stunt local businesses and prevent economic growth. They're blocking the 100% expenses of qualified non-residential manufacturing and property production and improvements that helps fuel such commercial investment. And finally, the D.C. Council is blocking the full and immediate expensing of a business's domestic research and experimental expenditures. They apparently would rather have investments in innovation in other states or even foreign nations as opposed to a right here at home in the nation's capital city. Now, you might find yourself wondering, why would the D.C. Council do this to their own residents and businesses? And I'll tell you why. It's because the Working Family Tax Cut was President Trump's bill. The D.C. Council would rather punish their own residents, their own people, than recognize the achievements of President Trump's legislation. This is anti-working class, it's anti-senior citizens, and of course, it's anti-business. They say they need more time to analyze and consider these provisions, the same provisions that had numerous congressional debates and hearings. These justifications are just excuses to play politics. And it's all at the expense of local residents and businesses who want to and should be able to keep their hard-earned money in their pockets to reinvest in their families, communities, and businesses. The House must swiftly exercise its constitutional responsibility to oversee the District of Columbia and reject this misguided legislation from going into effect. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to unite in support of D.C. taxpayers and businesses and support this necessary resolution of disapproval. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from